Good evening. It is the 20th of July. Y'all, last time on this show, I told you something simple. You cannot tariff a thunderstorm. You cannot tariff a firestorm. You cannot fix a real problem by blaming something that isn't the true cause. Tonight, I've got two more for that same list. You cannot hide a body count and call it operational security. And you cannot let a man investigate himself and call it accountability. This week, the government tried both, one overseas, one right here at home. I want to walk you through both because they're the same instinct wearing two different uniforms. Y'all, let's go.
Standing for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Built upon the shoulders of the Constitution, rule of law, and the animating principle that we are all created equal. I need to hear a hallelujah, though I'm not considered a believer by some. I still believe in the warmth of heaven come. I need the rapture I feel when my feet touch the green, green grass of home. Then I know I have reached the valley of kingdom come. And when I
Y'all, welcome to the Hillbilly Think Tank with Spencer Keck. I am the educated hillbilly, and no, that's not an oxymoron. Don't call me a moron. There have been educated, erudite, and emancipated hillbillies in Kentucky ever since my kith and kin came through the Cumberland Gap with Daniel Boone and the Long Hunters on their quest for life, liberty, and that pursuit of happiness. Here, right here. Again, I'm Spencer Keck, retired Navy doc, currently a public school teacher. I am a combat veteran and a candidate for magistrate on the Hardin County Fiscal Court, District 3. All right. This segment, overseas, the hidden attacks. Now, y'all, let's think back to Vietnam. I was born as the last 3, 4 years, maybe 5 of Vietnam were winding down. So it's not in my memory bank. But my father fought in that war in the very, very beginning. And one of the things that anyone who wants to run a war that is needless learn from that is don't let the body count be on TV because voters, and we're supposed to be the government, if this is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, the voters do not like it when the body count starts climbing, especially if there is no end in sight to the war and no one has given a real good reason for a war. So remember that. That's a historical fact. So look at this one first. First, Iran. The New York Times reported Monday, citing multiple U.S. officials, that in the week before Friday's missile strike that killed at least 2 American service members in Jordan, remember one's also missing, Iran actually carried out 3 other attacks on U.S. forces there. Attacks the Pentagon never told the public about. Those 3 hidden strikes injured dozens of American troops and damaged several helicopters. Not reported, not acknowledged, just absorbed quietly. The stated reason from a U.S. military official, Central Command isn't required to announce injuries, especially when troops recover and return to duty, and releasing details could help Iran refine its targeting. Now, I understand operational security is real. Some things genuinely shouldn't be broadcast in real time, but Central Command, CENTCOM, has also stopped releasing its daily count of Iranian targets struck, and a Washington Post analysis of satellite imagery reportedly found damage to our own installations in the Middle East, running well past what the Pentagon has ever admitted. That's not a one-time security call. That's a pattern of a war effort that keeps getting smaller in public and staying just as costly in private. At least 16 Americans dead, 17 now, more than likely, since this war started February 28. And even that number has been disputed as undercounted since nearly the beginning. And on Fox News this weekend, even one of the president's most loyal supporters, Maria Bartiromo, said flat out he couldn't understand how Iran is still capable of hitting our bases when the president claimed back in March its military had been destroyed 100%. You cannot hide a body count from the people paying for the war with their own sons and daughters. Eventually, the arithmetic finds you. And we got to remember that. Next segment, at home, the investigator steps aside. Now, the domestic half of tonight's story, and it rhymes with the first one exactly. The New York Times also reported this week that the FBI managers around the country were told in a written notice that the Bureau will no longer investigate physical confrontations involving ICE agents, including assault claims that in the past have sometimes turned up evidence used to prosecute agents for civil rights violations. Take that job away from the FBI, and it falls to Homeland Security investigations, which is plainly a division inside ICE. The agency accused of using excessive force would investigate the agency accused of using excessive force. And here's the detail that should stop you cold if you're a blue-blooded American. Homeland Security Investigations doesn't even have jurisdiction to investigate civil rights violations in the first place. So the one body with the legal authority to check this kind of case steps back, and the body replacing it isn't allowed to ask the hardest questions at all. Now, to be fair and complete, the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security have both publicly called this report false and say nothing has changed. I'll give you that denial straight because a fair hearing means giving it. But this guidance reportedly went out to FBI offices the same week as two more fatal ICE shootings, one in Texas, one in Maine, which is a strange week to coincidentally start pulling back the one outside check on the agency's use of force against citizens and anybody in this country. Next segment, the names, respectfully, because there are names behind this, and I will not let them become statistics on this show. Alex Preddy was 37 years old, an ICU nurse, shot and killed by federal agents in Minneapolis on January 24th. The county medical examiner ruled his death a homicide. That's not a pundit's opinion. That's the coroner's finding. Renee Good was 37, a mother killed by the same agents in the same city 17 days earlier. In Houston on July 7th, Lorenzo Salgado Araujo was killed during a traffic stop. Federal officials themselves later confirmed he wasn't even the target of the operation, yet they murdered him. And last week in Maine, Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero, a Colombian man authorized to work in this country and the father of a 3-year-old little girl, was shot and killed in his vehicle. authorized to be here. 4 names, 4 families. That's the weight underneath tonight's policy story, and I won't let it get lighter than it is. Next up, the rhetoric this week, and they got a lot of rhetoric. So, and here's how the borders are. Tom Horman talked about all of this in his own words this week. On CBS's Face the Nation, Sunday, pressed on the pattern of shootings, Homan said, they'd be alive today if they simply complied with a vehicle stop by federal law enforcement. Just comply. When the anchor pointed out that the Houston family said Salgado thought he was being robbed because the vehicle wasn't marked, and we've seen these men that are doing these type of shootings, these ICE agents, they're usually not marked, and they often have masks on. If I see an unmarked vehicle with gunmen jumping out with masks on, let me tell you, it's not going to be good either. Homan didn't back down. He compared it to plainclothes New York Police Department tactics and moved on. Now, y'all, let's pause just for a second at that. When was the last time any town or state in this country wanted to be compared to the New York Police Department tactics? When have we said, oh yeah, we look up to big old New York City Police Department? When have we all said we want to be just like New York here in Kentucky? And yet Homan thinks that's good enough to say, hey, New York does it, we can too. And at the White House, discussing Minnesota directly, he said something I want you to hear exactly as he said it. All the mistakes they say happen in Minnesota, the mistakes they claim in Minnesota, a lot of them I don't think, were mistakes. Then on why people keep dying. It comes down to one simple fact, he said. These people failed to comply with law enforcement. All they had to do is comply. If they did, they'd be alive today, he said. He's also said on a separate occasion that anti-ICE rhetoric from the president's critics is to blame for the violence, warning of more bloodshed unless his critics, in his words, shut their mouth. Again, y'all, I really want to be exact about what that rhetoric does. It takes every single one of these deaths and moves the moral weight entirely onto the person who died before any investigation. The very investigation his own agency is now stepping back from running independently. Compliance is real, and I'll say more about that in a minute, but they'd be alive if they complied. That is not a finding. It's a verdict delivered by the man in charge of the agency that pulled the trigger before the facts are even gathered by anyone who doesn't work for him. We got to remember that now that they're saying they don't want to be investigated by any other federal investigating agencies. Now, y'all, I keep mentioning it on here. I grew up under the Red Scare. We were told that the communists, such as those in the Soviet Union or China, were going to come after us and get us. And if they took this country over, they were going to make it to where the police would run around, snatching people off the streets, terrorizing everyone, telling everyone to obey the state police, the government police. And yet, now that it's in our country, we're supposed to accept it? Because what? The party you like is using those tactics? I'm not buying it. And I'm a blue-blooded American. And I am from, like I said, that stock that came through the Cumberland Gap on their quest to get away from this kind of nonsense themselves. So, all right, the next segment, the reactions. Now, the response came fast, and I want to give you a sample because it wasn't just one side, of course. Chuck Todd wrote that plenty of Republicans facing re-elections, he said, won't be happy that the official White House line on ICE killings is to blame the dead. Ron Filipkowski, answered Homan's compliance line with a single pointed question. You mean like Ashley Babbitt? Invoking a name conservatives have spent years insisting deserves sympathy, despite disobeying an order, which is exactly the double standard being pointed out. David Beer, an immigration analyst at the Cato Institute, said his understanding of the Preddy shooting specifically was that Preddy had turned away and was not engaging when DHS agents still attacked and killed him. That's Beer's characterization, and I'll let the medical examiner's homicide ruling stand as the independently confirmed fact right alongside it. And a film director, Duncan Jones, summed up the mood in 4 words: no mistakes, just horrific policy. Now, we'll give them a little bit of a, fair is fair, the line. So the honest hearing, because, of course, officer safety is not a fake concern. Now, they have claimed that ICE and Border Patrol agents have actually faced documented cases of vehicles being used as weapons against them. All right. They're saying it's documented. So I'm not going to assume that every single case isn't true. I'm going to give them, they say, hey, there's been some documented cases. But Homan's underlying point that resisting a lawful stop raises the danger for everyone, it might, that isn't wrong as a general principle of the law, but you have a right in the United States of America not to be stopped by the Gestapo. So here's my answer. A general principle of law is not a blank check for every individual shooting and is definitely not a substitute for an investigation. An unmarked car with no visible badge is not the same as a clearly identified traffic stop. The Salgado family's confusion was absolutely reasonable, not defiant. A man who's turned away and not engaging, like Preddy was, that isn't resisting anything. And comply or die stops being law enforcement and starts being something else. The moment the agency that decides whether force was justified is the very agency whose officer used it. You don't get to skip the investigation and then declare with total confidence exactly whose fault it was. That's not the rule of law. That's a verdict without a trial, and that is not American, well, at least according to this blue-blooded American from Kentucky. All right, let's bring it home to Hardin County. So, bringing it home, because this is a principle that I lived inside a chain of command for 24 years. And it's the same principle I would bring to that fiscal court seat when you elect me. In the military, we had the Uniform Code of Military Justice, courts martial, inspectors general, real separate bodies whose entire job was making sure the people with the guns answered to somebody who wasn't also holding a gun. And this is, straight up the honest to God truth. So that wasn't red tape. That is what let the public trust with us and let us have the guns in the first place with the public's trust. Now, in my service, as I served both in the Navy and Marine Corps as a hospital corpsman, I never once felt like oversight of me or of the services was an insult to the uniform. I felt that we were servants to the United States of America and its citizens. And so we had better be willing to have checks placed on us by the citizen government. Now, a magistrate doesn't get to investigate his own vote. A county doesn't get to grade its own contract. And a federal agency should never, ever get to be the only judge of whether its own agents were right to pull the trigger. any more than a general should get to hide his own casualty count from the country that's paying for the war. And remember, the country that's paying for the war with its own sons and daughters. Whether it's Jordan or Minneapolis, the fix is exactly the same and it's not complicated. Tell the truth about the cost and let somebody who isn't wearing your uniform check your work. That is not weakness. That's the whole idea behind government answering to the people instead of the other way around. And again, countries that don't answer to the people, we don't call them democracies. We call them either communist dictatorships or fascist dictatorships or any kind of dictatorship, but we don't call them democracies. When they don't answer to the people, they have ceased being democratic republics. And that is a fact you can take to the bank any day you want to. And I'll go with you to cash that check. So let's look at exactly what it was that I'm, referring to, so you understand I'm not just pulling this out of thin air or from somewhere else in the nether regions of my body. It's actually, true. And we can pull that up. Let's see if I can pull that up from what I found today. So, all right, again, let's see, Homan. So, as I said, Mr. Homan himself thinks that, and he said out loud, if people would just comply, they wouldn't have gotten shot.
Hi, Mr. Homan. Starting with what had happened this morning in New York City, can you tell us more about the identity of the anti-ICE rider and then anything you know about the manifesto?
No, I just got apprised of that before I walked out here, so I don't want to get ahead of the FBI. I don't know what changed since I walked out here, so it's too early. I'm not going to comment on it.
Sir,
Other than this is another example of someone, attacking ICE because of the constant mismessaging and vilification of the men and women of ICE.
So will there be investigations into ICE agents who either kill people that they are pursuing or are involved in some kind of violent altercation?
Of course it will be.
The New York Times is reporting that the FBI was told over the weekend that they will no longer investigate confrontations with immigration agents.
Well, let's be clear. What we mean by confrontations, it's always been history that, for instance, what happened in Minneapolis and Chicago and Newark, prosecution of 111 cases, which are assault on law enforcement officers, is usually handled by HSI, criminal investigations. The FBI does get involved with them, but they're not leading. But when it comes to shootings, the FBI is always taking the lead. So I think that messaging is a little confusing. The FBI is still going to continue to lead shooting investigations. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not aware of any change in policy, and I think the FBI and DHS actually pushed back on that story.
Mr. Homan, when it comes to body cameras, you're a fan of body cameras now, correct?
Yes, I've always been a fan.
Why did the administration? There was an executive order the president put forward when he came into office to rescind the Biden executive order that was mandating body cameras. Why the change now? Why is the administration?
Look, I'm a supporter of body cameras. I know that body cameras exonerate officers almost 90% of the time. I want the American people to see what that ICE agent sees. You can have cell phone cameras from across the street or cameras from the side or city cameras. I want the American people to see what that ICE officer sees when he takes action. And I think it's going to help ICE with the false media that's out there about him.
But then why did the administration roll back what the Biden administration was trying to do to get body cameras and all?
That's a question above me. I'm someone. I came back, and then when Democrats shut the government down, I was a part of that negotiation team up on the Hill. They kept going to Minnesota. All the mistakes they say happened in Minnesota. I don't think there's a lot of the mistakes they claim in Minnesota. A lot of them were, I don't think, mistakes. But one thing they asked was, we want body cameras. I said, well, there's money, $120 million in the bill you're holding up for me to buy the body cameras. So The reason there's not body cameras nationwide right now because they shut the government down. And anybody doesn't believe that, look it up. Now that we have the funding, body cameras have been purchased. As of last week, they were training the trainers. Body cameras are being deployed throughout the country, training the trainers so they can go to, a Boston field office and train everybody. Here's how you use it.
So it takes all of 5 minutes to train yourself to attach a body camera and turn it on. This is a bunch of smoke screens. And you heard him there saying he doesn't think anybody in Minneapolis made a mistake. So he didn't think the shooting of Alex Preddy or Renee Good was a mistake. And that's just straight up from his mouth. We can keep on going on, but I don't want to kill all of our time with this. Again, you can watch it on PBS or any of them. He's going to go on and say that they just had to comply. That's what he, further on down this video, but I don't want to kill your time. He's going to say that. So here it is. I mean, it's in our face. It's true. No one's, I'm not making it up. And we have to hold our government accountable. We cannot slide into the type of action that the Soviet Union had. I grew up fearing that, and I don't want to see it happen here on our shores at all. That would be completely unfair to every American alive. So, all right, y'all, let me know what you think. Was this something that, should they be able to investigate themselves? Am I off track? Could they actually honestly investigate themselves? And, that's where I'm at. I don't think so. I don't think that, in the military, we knew, hey, that wasn't the way it should be. I don't think any agency should ever investigate its own use of force, especially not one on American soil. That's just against our innate principles of liberty. And we really need our liberty in order to preserve our life and keep that happiness. So put your comments in there and let me know what you think. Should any agency ever investigate its own use of force? Good evening, Lorena. I'm sure you're watching. I see my one viewer there on currently. Welcome. Hope you're having a good evening. Hope you're having a great beginning of the week. So I just got back today from my vacation up at a family reunion, as I reported earlier, up there in the great north, up there in the far upper reaches of Wisconsin and the border of upper Wisconsin and the peninsula of Michigan. It was great. All right, y'all. I really tell you, again, we've got to get back to this life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. That's what we are striving to recapture, right? We're losing that emphasis. We've absolutely got to get back to it.
Standing for life, liberty.
Y'all, I am Spencer Keck, the Educated Hillbilly, and this has been the Hillbilly Think Tank. Come to a fiscal court meeting, bring your hardest question. Whether I earn your vote or not, I'll answer it, and I will see you there. And we'll answer it together, truthfully. Keep thinking deeply, and remember, in Kentucky, united we stand, divided we fall. Y'all, that is not just words on a flag, that is the glue that holds us together. And if we love our neighbors as ourselves and recognize that, yes, we are our brother's keeper and our sister's keeper, then we cannot be divided and we will not fall. Remember, everyone deployed overseas, and bless your corazón. That is Spanish for heart. Have a great rest of the week. This has been paid for by Spencer Keck. If you want to know more, go to SpencerKeckMagistrate.com. I'd love to talk to you here or there.
great-grandfather didn't grow stop running because they were criminals. He did because when the bank foreclosed on farms across the